Welcome, Gunrunner.
I've been doing these amazing exclusives videos for some time now, nearly 2 years in fact, and in that time I've covered a huge array of different systems from the BBC Micro to the VTech Creative Vision. But one format that is very noticeable by its absence, and one that I've been gagging to cover, is exclusive arcade games. The one thing that's been holding me back from doing this is the also rather popular Greatest Arcade Games series, but now that's come to an end, I can feel my boots. Of all the videos I've done on this particular subject, this one was by far the hardest to put together. That's because I already had so many titles I wanted to include that were fresh in my mind, no doubt fueled by the aforementioned Greatest Arcade Games videos, and getting that down to just 10 seemed a near impossible task. In the end I decided to add some rationale to my decision making, firstly prioritising favourites from my youth, and secondly trying to make sure I had a broad spectrum of different genres on offer. If I hadn't included the second filter, we may have well just ended up with a video full of scrolling beat-em-ups. With all that in mind, I'm hoping that I managed to get the balance just right here, not only in terms of the selection criteria, but also by including a mix of popular favourites and genuine hidden gems. So hopefully there is something for everyone here, and I'm sure those other games in my mind will feature in a follow-up video at some other point. For now though, sit down, grab a drink and a snack, and enjoy my list of 10 amazing arcade exclusives.
In the two-dimensional world of video dots and dashes, flat blips and formless blobs, one video arcade game soars a dimension above the rest. Saxon! Experience the control as you climb and dive. Feel the power as you attack and evade. Discover a new level of excitement with the true feel of action in 3 dimensions. Saxon, from the master design engineers of Sega.
The big theme of 1992 was definitely scrolling beat-em-ups. After the release of Capcom's Final Fight, the genre simply exploded, and Konami were very much the first to grab that ball and really run with it, creating a specific engine for that very task, which debuted with the amazing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But one of the lesser known scrolling brawlers to use that template was Asterix, which was based on another youth-focused property in the form of the hugely popular French comic strip of the same name. Okay, so it's incredibly similar to Turtles and other games that use the same hardware like The Simpsons and X-Men, but that's certainly no bad thing, and the more humorous subject matter very much gives the game its own unique charm. Get a second player on board, and the quick-footed and quick-thinking Asterix can be joined by his long-term sidekick, the slow and lumbering but obscenely strong Obelix, for even more fun. There's a host of recognisable characters from the comics with smaller cameo appearances. In fact, there's lots of great fan service all round really, and the graphics really pop out of the screen. I will never tire of duffing up those idiotic Roman soldiers, and I'm sure that you'll all feel the same.
Crazy!
Heavily inspired by buddy cop shows and films like Tango and Cash and Starsky and Hutch, Lucky and Wild is a crazy combination of a driving game and a shoot 'em up that puts the characters at its core. It sees our heroes racing around the city trying to take out 5 wanted criminals, and then the local crime boss, the Big Cigar himself. As they pursue the suspect, Lucky and Wild must fire at enemy cars and destroy any projectiles fired towards them. as well as hazards put in their way. When you catch up with a suspect, you must frantically shoot at the car until all the energy is depleted and before your time runs out. One of the best features of this game is the way you can team up with a second player to split the duties between driving and shooting, a very innovative feature indeed. As you race across the city taking out the bad guys, you can also watch the reactions of the two stars in the rearview mirror, and after each stage you roll into the Pink Cat's garage to be entertained by a group of wannabe Playboy models. Bright colours and brilliant use of hardware scaling really help bring this game to life, and it's right up there with the best arcade games to never hit the home.
Give it up. Well done.
If there was an award for most crazily titled arcade game ever, then Irem's Ninja Baseball Batman would undoubtedly win the top prize. But make sure you emphasise the space between the last two words, because this has absolutely nothing to do with the caped DC Comics superhero. This is a cartoon-styled scrolling beat-em-up for up to 4 players, where you're on a mission to recover various artefacts that have been stolen from the Baseball Hall of Fame. Each of the crazy characters has their own style, and you meet some equally bonkers baddies along the way too. There are also various items you can pick up, including new weapons and gangs of cheerleaders who help you clear the screen of enemies. The art style in this game is especially unusual, as is the general theme, especially for a Japanese company like Irem, so I was interested to learn that the game was one of the few created by the American branch, and the story behind this game's creation is well worth looking up, as it's incredibly interesting. Sadly, there isn't really the time or space to explain it in full here, but what I will tell you is that Ninja Baseball Batman is a truly wonderful arcade experience. When it comes to arcade hidden gems, I always argue that the Great 1000 Miles Rally from Kaneko is one of the greatest finds. This fantastic racing game uses a really unique tilted overhead perspective with rendered cars, realistic handling and stunning scenery that is based on real locations across Italy. In fact, it does have a certain amount of similarities with the popular SNK Neo Geo game Neo Drift Out, although that came out 2 years later, so it's pretty clear to see who inspired who. It's based on the real-life races of the Mille Miglia in Italy, and there are a host of historic and iconic cars to choose from, including the Ferrari 250, Mercedes 300 SLR, Alfa Romeo Giuliana SZ, Porsche 550 and Jaguar D-Type. Once the starting flag goes down, you have just 60 seconds to get to the finish line. If you make it within this tight time limit, you move into the next race. There are 12 stages in total to race through, and it certainly won't be easy to claim that trophy. The unique structure of the game, as well as the attention to realism, makes the Great 1000 Miles Rally feel very different to any other racer of the era, and for that reason alone it's well worth playing. There are also a couple of equally slick sequels to take notice of too. A really big deal was made of Sega's link up with Michael Jackson back in the day, and his input resulted in two very different games being created. One for Sega's home consoles, and this arcade game, which doesn't seem to be anywhere near as well remembered. And that's a real shame, because arcade Moonwalker is a really original and incredibly enjoyable multiplayer experience, where you take on the bad guys, rescue the children, and even transform into a giant robot. The isometric visuals really make this one stand out from the crowd, especially when compared to the 2D home iterations. Although there are some gameplay similarities between home and arcade, such as saving those pesky kids, they are very different games, with this one being very much more focused on the fighting rather than the exploring. This itself is very interesting because MJ was very adamant that the game could be violent, contributing greatly to the game's design. So all enemies are defeated with magical dance moves, much like the home versions, but with a bit more oomph to it. The multiplayer features add greatly to the game, and the soundtrack, as you'd imagine, is also a big bonus. Even if you weren't a fan of the much acclaimed artist, you'll still really enjoy this great coin-op. Remember the classic Capcom slash 'em up Strider? Of course you do, because it's rightly regarded as an all-time classic. But I bet you don't remember its unofficial sequel, Osmond, do you? And that's a shame, because it's every bit as brilliant. By 1996, the team that made Strider had left Capcom and joined Mitchell Corporation, where they created this very game, with both being headed up by the hugely acclaimed director Koichi Yotsui. Instead of a futuristic Soviet setting, Osmond is set in a neo-lit cyberpunk Arabian-style world. Strider Hiryu himself has been replaced by a Middle Eastern protagonist named Kirin, who fights without any weapons at all, but the basic gameplay is very similar indeed, as you battle your way through all the levels, bouncing off the walls and sliding across platforms. You have a wide range of acrobatic attacks to defeat the enemies, and a special attack that can be used once per life and is best saved for those troublesome bosses. Different coloured power-ups can be collected in order to enhance your various abilities. I don't think it would be an exaggeration to call Osmond one of the last truly great 2D arcade games. It really is that good. Now, if you'd just seen the arcade flyer for this game and known when the game came out, you'd be excused for thinking that G.I. Joe was going to be just another generic scrolling beat 'em up using Konami's trusty Turtles template. So when you discover there's a totally different type of game, you become pretty excited. Then, once you start playing this into the screen run and gunner, you'll be even more so. G.I. Joe is an all-action arcade experience that supports up to 4 players and is more than a fitting use of the license. It's not the most well-known game on this list, but it's undoubtedly one of the best and a game that I find myself coming back to time after time, as there is nothing else out there quite like it really. I mean, it has elements of your usual run and gun, but the fact that it's into the screen makes it feel more like something like Operation Thunderbolt or Cabal. Especially the latter of those in many ways actually, as it's also third person. Joining us in this mission are Duke, Scarlet, Roadblock and of course Snake Eyes, as they set out to defeat Cobra once and for all. The scaling effects are particularly impressive here and really help bring this game to life.
Yo, Joe!
The Super Scaler games were hugely successful for Sega and really showed off the power of arcade games when compared to home consoles. Undoubtedly one of the most impressive of them all is Airbyte Cop, one of the last titles created for the Sega X board, which was the third revision of the famous arcade system and debuted with Afterburner. The game plays a little bit like a futuristic version of Chase HQ as you chase down the criminals with your high-powered hoverbike. On your way to taking out the main bad guy, you must also crash into his various cronies and try to destroy them. On your controls there is a button on the left which causes you to jump, whilst twisting the right handlebar forward engages the turbo boost function, which both play an important part in the gameplay for both avoiding hazards and making those violent arrests. The visually advanced nature of the game is probably the main reason it never made the transition to any home systems of the time, although I'm sure it would have worked really well on the Saturn had Sega chosen to come back to it. So the only way to play this highly underrated classic is by finding a real machine or firing up MAME. As many of you will know, I'm an absolutely huge fan of scrolling beat-em-ups and really had to try and stop myself from including more of them on this list. If you asked me to name my favourite, I would immediately respond with Streets of Rage 2 on the Mega Drive. However, if you asked me to name my favourite arcade beat-em-up, the instant answer would be Alien vs Predator. Released the same year as the more famous Atari Jaguar game and based on the same franchise, it's a very different affair, but is just as authentic to the subject matter. but rather than taking a realistic stance, or reminiscent of the movies, this one is very much focused on the looks and themes of the original comic books. There are 4 selectable characters, 2 humans including Major, Dutch, Schaefer, and 2 different classes of Predator, Hunter and Warrior. Doesn't matter who you pick though, because the enemies are all still the same. Hordes of pesky xenomorphs, and up to 3 of you can team up to face them. There are your usual array of pickups, special weapons or gigantic bosses here. It's all pretty standard stuff in many ways actually, but the execution of the game is just superb, and the action is almost endless. The best wrestling game ever subject comes up quite often on forums and Facebook groups, and for me there'll only ever be one contender, WWF Wrestle Fest. Produced by the same people behind Double Dragon, this game managed to encapsulate everything that was great about wrestling in the early 90s. First, there's the awesome character selection that includes tag teams like the Legion of Doom and Demolition, alongside legends such as Mr. Perfect, the Ultimate Warrior, Jay the Snake Roberts, and the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, my own personal favourite. Then you have the play modes where you can choose to enter the Royal Rumble or form a tag team to challenge the LOD on Saturday night's main event. Each wrestler has their own individual moveset, complete with those famous finishing moves, and there is commentary throughout. Best of all perhaps, WWF Wrestle Fest can be played by up to 4 people, making the Royal Rumble mode a real hoot. It's an absolute disgrace that this game never got ported to any home systems of the era, because it's a timeless classic that remains one of my most played arcade games ever. Even if you hate wrestling, you'll love this.
The new fantasy adventure from Atari Games. The most fun a quarter can buy.
And that rounds up my look at 10 amazing arcade exclusives. Can you think of any other one-off titles that only ever came out in coin-operated form that should have made the list? Or do you think some of these games were unworthy of inclusion? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following patrons in particular for their much appreciated pledges: D. Vaughan, Mitchell Valentino, Neptune, Seth A. Robinson, Carl Olsen, Aussie B, Dos Gamerman, Grady Haynes, Troy Dube, Paul Daniel, S-Mania 999, Retro Resolution, Paul Metcalf, James Taylor, and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to host extra content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights, and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.